So getting a quick sketch of triangle x, y, z. I can see that point y is at -5, -2. That means it's going to be in the third quadrant. So it's going to be pretty far down here if x marks the spot, if that's the origin. And then I can see that point z, its x value is 0, but the y value is 7. So that's going to be on your y-axis pretty high up here. So I'm going to put z up here at 0, 7. Make sure I'm copying these points down wrong, because if I get one of the coordinate wrong, then everything is wrong from that. So make sure you're very careful with these. And then point x would be at 2, and then go up 1. So x would be somewhere around here. And then, like I said, y would be in the, in this third quadrant down here, where you'd go over -5 and -3. So this is not an extremely accurate diagram. It's just for us to get an idea of what this triangle looks like. And also, it allows us to easily identify what are the opposite sides and get a good feel for it. So check to make sure that you have your coordinates correct, that you wrote them down correctly. Y is at -5, -3. X is at +2, +1. And Z is at 0, +7. So here we go. We need a point that these perpendicular bisectors must go through, and we need the slope in order to write the equations of these perpendicular bisectors. Once we have the 3 equations, then we can solve the systems of equations, figure out where they all intersect. Again, if this was a test question, you would have to interpret it and know what you're looking for. So the test question would just say, hey, this is your given triangle, give me the coordinates of the circumcenter. So what you would have to think is, okay, circumcenter, that's the point of concurrency for the perpendicular bisectors. So you would write, all right, I am all about perpendicular bisectors right now. I got to find the equations of these 3 perpendicular bisectors. Then you ask, okay, well, I need a slope and a point that they go through. What point must the perpendicular bisectors go through? Go. It's got to go through the midpoint, right? It's bisecting these triangle sides, so it's got to go through these midpoints of each side. That's your first step. So go ahead and start locating the midpoints. Remember, when you find midpoints, it's just averages. So what is the average of 2 and -5? It'd be -3 halves. We're just finding averages. And then for the average of +1 and -3, it would be a -1. And you need to check these answers for me. The midpoint for this side would be -5 halves, and the midpoint for this side would be, the x coordinates -5/2, and then the y coordinates +2. Then over here you got a +1 and a +4. Did we get these midpoints, or can someone second me on these? We're all good? Okay. So these are the points that I know these perpendicular bisectors have to go through. So like I said earlier, I'm going to set up these problems extremely similarly. I'm going to write the point that these guys got to go through. So I know one of these perpendicular bisectors is going to go through that midpoint. I know one of them is going to go through this midpoint, and I know my last one's going to have to go through this midpoint. Now I need to figure out, well, what are the slopes? What's the slope of these perpendicular bisectors that are going through these 3 points? So take one at a time. This guy right here that's going through this segment's midpoint. How am I going to determine the slope of this perpendicular bisector? Of what?
The slope of whatever line you're trying to...
Okay, so the green one. What am I going to first find the slope of?
YZ.
I got to first find the slope of segment YZ. I got to know this slope so I can figure out the slope that's going to be perpendicular to it. So we know that it's rise over run. I can see that it starts at -3 and it goes up to 7. That's a change in 10 units for the y. Then it starts at -5 and goes up to 0. That's a change in +5. So in the end, my slope of this segment is +2. So when I write the perpendicular bisector, am I going to use +2 as my slope? No, because it's the perpendicular bisector. So I need to know the perpendicular slope, and it's going to go through the midpoint to bisect it. So once you have the point that you know it has to go through and the slope of this line or this segment, plug these values into your point slope form or formula, which reads y minus y1 is equal to m times the quantity x minus x1, where x1 and y1 are the coordinates of your point, and m is the slope of the line. So I've got y minus 2 is equal to my slope, which is a -1/2 x. I am subtracting whatever the value of my x coordinate is. So when I subtract a -5/2, that's like adding a +5/2. What's the first thing I got to do after I plug my values into this point slope formula? You got to distribute first. Get rid of those parentheses. So I'm going to get y minus 2 is equal to -1/2 x minus 5/4. Once I distribute this. Now I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So I'm going to get y is equal to -1/2 x plus 3/4. Did anyone else get this as the equation for the perpendicular bisector of segment YZ? Yeah? If you see an error, then please tell me. Like, don't let me keep going on, because I'm human. I can make mistakes. Let's go to the next one then. So now I got to find the perpendicular bisector of segment YX. That's just the midpoint that I listed off next. So I need to find the slope of this segment and then take the negative reciprocal so I can know what is perpendicular to that. So, slope of segment YX is equal to, the numerator is the rise. It's the change in y. I can see that it goes from -3 to +1. That's going up 4. It's going from -3 to +1. Then I can see that the run is going from a -5 to a +2. That is a +7. That sounds like fun, having a slope of with a 7 and a 4 in it. So what would be the perpendicular slope? -7/4 would be my perpendicular slope. So we're going to have fun with this guy. Here we go. I've got a point that it goes through, the midpoint of the segment. Then I've got the perpendicular slope of that. The slope would be perpendicular to that segment. Once you have a point and a slope, plug it into the point slope formula. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it in and say y, when you subtract a negative number, it's like adding a positive. So this is y minus a -1 is equal to my -7/4 slope, x minus a -3/2, which is like adding a +3/2. Are we okay with how I have plugged these values in? Anyone see any errors? Okay, let's go ahead and distribute and then subtract 1 from both sides.